have your wireless mic? Nope, you're good. We'll just have you guys pass them back and forth. And actually, she'll start out with it. Sorry, I gave it to her first. It's fine with me. All right, there are more sheets up here if anyone needs to come and grab a sheet. Otherwise, we'll get started with some announcements. Coming up here next week is Disney Trivia Night for youth group. So kids, you can form a team of up to 6 people and come out and test your Disney trivia skills. That'll be from 8 to 9, and we will meet in the chapel after worship, or after confirmation. And then in December, there is an Ugly Sweater Christmas party on December 3rd, I believe. So that'll be also from 8 to 9 p.m., and we will meet just in the gathering space here.
Can I share a quick story? I shared this at confirmation. We had an Ugly Sweater Christmas Sunday a few years back, and that turned kind of into more of a festive sweater Sunday. And so there were blurred lines between what was the ugly Christmas sweaters and what were the festive ones. I wore a very ugly one. I got great compliments on it for how nice it was. And I saw some others that I thought were ugly that weren't intended to be ugly. So this has been my opportunity to confess something to you tonight, and I appreciate your forgiveness. So you can wear whatever sweater you want. All sweaters are welcome here on the 4th of December.
Yes. Just a reminder, the Thanksgiving Wednesday, we will not have confirmation programming. There will be worship, so if you show up for worship, we'd love to have you. Is there pie after? There's pie after, right?
Oh, there's pie after. There's pie. It'll be a blended service, really great traditional and some contemporary as well. So we hope you'll check it out and then eat some pie with us.
Yes. We are still looking for a few more volunteers to be substitute leaders in case someone has to miss a small group. And we're also looking for some leaders to help with youth group nights. So Disney Trivia Night or that Ugly Sweater Christmas party. If you would be willing to help, please send me an email or come talk to me after. It's a fun time to just get to know kids and be a presence and interact a little bit more. And you can also test your Disney trivia if you would like. And then finally, I have had to talk to a few students about this. Please wait until after worship is over to turn in your worship notes. It can be pretty hard to fill out a worship note without actually hearing the sermon.
Like maybe a minute into my sermon, like, you're already done? I mean,
So please wait until after you're leaving worship to turn in those worship notes, and please wait to fill them out until the sermon is actually happening. I do read through all of them. It's really fun to be able to see what's going on in your lives, kids, and just get to know you better. I know it's really hard for me to have 140 or 150 conversations in a week. So that's my way to kind of see what's going on in your lives. And I do write down all of the questions for the pastors that you guys have, and I pass them on. So if we do a Stump the Pastor night, we do see all of your questions, including what is our favorite song, what is our favorite food, and so on. So. And
the drawings that you put on there as well. They're overall very nice.
That's right. Pastor Taylor talked a little bit about this, but because our speaker cannot be here tonight, hopefully we'll have him in December or an upcoming month instead. But we are excited to be able to talk to you guys a little bit more about faith stories and how faith is involved in our lives as adults. We'll kind of break it up a little bit so that you can have some time to discuss with your students too where faith is involved in your life. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. We are going to actually start with a discussion question for you guys. So between you and your student parents, go ahead and share with your child a little bit about your own faith journey. I think we can be in the habit so often of just going through the motions and trying to get our child to go through the motions. Go ahead and talk about where God has been involved in your life. What made you want your child to grow in faith, and what got you to get them in our programming here? So we'll give you a few minutes to discuss.
the Shepherd is pretty famous, isn't he? Or do I just think he's famous?
Yeah, I think in like the church
World?
the shepherd and
Yeah, he made both of those, right? It's Hetland, Hetland? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
That's okay.
Look at the sheep. Look at the sheep.
I'm always focused on this guy.
Look,
Yeah,
there are little baby lambs in his armpits. Isn't that fun? Giant Jesus. There he is. Tell him about what you do for weddings.
oh yeah, I tell people to stand in the armpits of Jesus. That's
That's really where you need him to be.
It truly is perfect placement.
Okay, you should look at this.
Well, and
thing
how
over
often
here.
are you walking out of church?
Yeah, I know.
Staring straight up.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, too. A view. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard that.
Well, we hope you've been able to just even start the conversation. One of the most important things we truly believe as a staff is that parents, you're the ones that are going to impact your kid for life. Okay? Now, we get to do this together, and I pray we do it long after our confirmation program. But we only get to be with your kids for an hour or two a week, maybe. And so we want to encourage you and equip you to continue to have these conversations. And it's not about having all the answers. It's about being real. It's about accompanying your student and loving on them and praying for them throughout this time. Well, I'm excited to have Danette Narum here. Danette is going to share part of her faith formation story. And part of why we're doing this tonight is to kind of model what it can be like for you guys to continue to have these conversations with your students. And so, Danette, we invite you to share. Give it up for Danette.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Danette. Some of you guys look familiar, and some maybe a little less so. I'll give you a little bit of information about me, especially in regards to the church. We joined Good Shepherd when our daughter was 2, and she's 23. So we've been members for 21 years. I also have a son. Well, we have a son. I'm married to Bill, and we have a son named Peter, who's 21. So we did the confirmation thing. Never had parents' nights, though, that I remember when our kids were going through. So this is a super cool thing, and I'm really impressed looking out here about how many people have come and are taking time to really invest in their kids' faith formation. It's pretty awesome. For me, I was very blessed. I had lived on a farm growing up. I had 4 siblings, and my parents, we all, went to church every Sunday. It wasn't optional. That is just what happened. And my parents were like, you can stay out as late as you want, but like church seemed like it was earlier if you stayed out too late. And then there was a work day because there was never a shortage of work. So if you chose to stay out late, you were going to go to church early and then also work all day. So we were pretty involved in our church. My parents volunteered a lot, and the expectation was we just went with them. So we did a lot of church stuff all the time. My parents were Luther League leaders. I don't know if anyone else, yeah? Okay, I don't know. Shaking your head. Know what I'm talking about. So it was a group that was, I think, high schoolers, maybe, is what it was. And my parents did it for all of us. So they were leaders of the Luther League for a really long time. But that also meant that we went to all of that, and we went to the national gatherings as well with my parents. So they worked really hard, I would say, on our faith formation, and really put a lot of time and energy, and there was a lot of praying at our house and devotions and stuff like that. I went to college. I went to MSUM, and at the time, I don't know what it's like now, and I loved MSUM, so I'm not talking negative if there are any more dragons out there. Pretty liberal college, and there was some professors that were really, they had a lot of influence for me for whatever reason, and talked a lot about how the Bible was a really beautiful book of poetry, and just talked about how, there's a lot of gods and just some other stuff that was very influential for me at the time. And I would go home and talk to my parents about it, and later found out that really was hard for especially my mom, but also my dad, because I really fell away from the church for a while. And I think it was pretty scary for them because they didn't know if I was, what was going to happen as far as lifelong for me. That went on for several years, and I was in a place where I didn't have a lot of peace in my life, so there was a lot of turmoil. And my mom, I think, again, my mom and my dad, I think it was really hard to watch me struggle, and they tried to answer my questions and, kind of usher me back, but I wasn't going to have it. I wasn't at a place where I was ready for that. Then I graduated, moved to Minneapolis, and God put some really, really cool people in my life that had really strong faith. One of them was a priest, and he took time. He was really young, and so I felt like I could really, I could understand him, and he broke down the Bible in a lot of questions that I had for me and really helped me to find my way back to God. However, I had done a lot of things in those years that were not in keeping with the way I was raised. And so I really struggled with coming back to God because I felt like my sins were too big. And I liked the idea of works, that you could work hard enough, and then your faith would be, strong enough. And I liked the idea of us, really having to do something to earn grace. And what took me a really long time, and I mean a really long time, was to figure out that Jesus' sacrifice on the cross was enough for me. And that even though I had fallen away and I had done some pretty big things that were egregious, God's grace covered me and loved me through it. And so that was really important to me, and it was really transformational for me. So when my daughter was, I was kind of going back to church a little on and off, but when she turned 2, she looked at me and my husband and said, "Is there a reason we don't go to church?" And we're like, "'Cause we're lazy." So anyway, that's why we went back to church, because our daughter really convicted us. And so since that time, my faith journey, I have to be in the study of the Word pretty much every day for me to keep my course. I'm a social worker, so I kind of see some of the harder things, I would say, in people's lives, and I hear really tough stories, and God really helps me stay grounded and helps me remember that I'm really just a tool that God uses. So that's been really helpful for me. Helpful in my marriage and in raising my kids, and really just super important in all aspects of my life. The last thing they wanted me to talk about is what I hope for you. I hope that you guys don't fall away like I did. I really do. That was a hard time. It was hard to come back. But bigger than that, I hope that you are able to accept and really realize how big God's love is for you, because God's love is huge. It's bigger than we can fathom, and God's grace is big enough for no matter what mistake you make. God loves you and wants you back and wants you to be with Him and be in right relationship with Him. So no matter what happens, even if you make mistakes like I did, God is there with open arms. And then I also hope that you remember that you have a faith family. Like I said, I was very blessed to have a family that went to church and was very helpful in my life. But all of you guys and my church family have been so important as my journey has continued. Both of my parents are dead. They died in their 60s and 70s, so they were much older. But anyway, having a faith family has been huge, just for me to be able to lean on when hard times come, and even when there's joys. My daughter got married last summer, and being able to share that with our church family, we had very few guests there, but a few of them were from the church, and it's so cool to get to share the highs and the lows with your families, your brothers and sisters in Christ. So anyway, that's me.
Awesome. Well, let's give her a round of applause. Thank you for sharing your story. We'll jump into a couple of discussion questions for you all. Who supports us and helps us in our faith life? Who are people that might unexpectedly impact our faith throughout the years? And I have in here who supports us and helps us as kind of a collective thing. So you can either relate it to your own personal life or the church in general, who helps us all together kind of grow in faith. Go ahead and take a couple minutes to discuss.
thinking that maybe they'd be like, what did she do? But the cool thing is, you don't want to have to tell anyone. All you got to tell Scott. And he's like, well, but I mean, I guarantee you, every other adult, like, if somebody asks you that, you can do whatever you do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Tell her about that TikTok video. So really, I just get forgiven just like that? How long does it take? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it seems good.
It's like John the Baptist when he's baptizing people, and someone's acting this out, but they're like, there's a whole line of people, right? And he like jumps in front of them, and he's like, so what happens then? We're all set then when we get dunked, and they're like, yeah, you're all good. He's like, and how long does it take? A couple, maybe like 30 seconds. He's like, oh, I'd like to go. Like John dunks him, and he gets up, and then in the corner you see like police cars coming. They're like, oh man, we just missed him. He's like, sorry guys. Nothing we can do about
No,
it.
nothing. I mean, you know, it's all fair and square. Yes, you're right. It's fair and square.
That's hilarious.
Everybody giggling in a very.
He said it's sermon illustration.
My voice like went a little higher when I was giggling.
We'll jump into the next discussion question here. Are there ever moments when when you don't feel God's presence or you feel like faith is absent in your life? And how do you handle those kinds of situations?
Yeah, it's happened sometimes.
I was just gonna say, yeah, right over here.
You like a bow tie? Little cap bow tie. Is it for like trashiest cat?
I was gonna say, we're like ugly sweater contest.
Stinks like cheese. Or? Yeah, it's half one out.
I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say this actually. I gotta tell you, my group of boys, Diana, oh, they're amazing.
Hey, speaking of that, would you be interested in taking Rebecca's group with your group next week?
Sure.
She only has like 4 or 5.
But there is an argument about who is the cool teacher. So that might be a good way to solve
We'll
it.
knock the wall down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So her group is a little bit more energetic, I think, but like,
I'm gonna have to open the door because it gets pretty hot in there. The last week my little breakfast.
All right, we'll round up those conversations. Again, we hope that you're able to start to have some authentic conversations, both student-wise and parent-wise as well. I think that one of the key things to lifelong faith formation is that continual conversation where we're in tune with each other, where we're continuing to add things into our spiritual practices that keep it both relevant to our life, but also something that adds to it. Pastor Mary's message, she referred to not working out for the last year and a half, and how difficult it was then once you start to kind of get back into that routine, and how it hurt so good, but it still hurt. when we start to think about our faith and when we start to think about faith practices, when we aren't adding things in to keep things interesting, I think it often becomes a bit stagnant. And it might even become something that we just stop doing because it doesn't take as much time or it's not of interest anymore. Well, I'm excited to also welcome Jason Hagelstrom to be able to share part of his story as well. And so, with no further ado, Jason.
Well, my name is Jason. My wife, Jenny, and I live in Moorhead with our 6 kids. Lola's 14, Serenity is 13, Gage is 8, Kiara's 7, Delilah's 6, and Vivian is 5. So raise your hand if you want their birthdays. I can do that too. So we started. We came to Good Shepherd in November 2017, and fell in love with this place. And the minute we walked in, that very first service, we were like, yeah, this is where we want to go. We just liked the outreach is what we were looking for, and just the idea of the walls here don't hold us in. We were able to go out and be the church out in the community, and that's what we really were looking for. I grew up in a Missouri Synod Lutheran church. My parents were amazing. They took us to church every single Sunday. Missouri Synod is very strict compared to here. I mean, I wasn't allowed to wear jeans to church or any of that stuff like that. I mean, it was the way it was. And the kind of music we sing here, we didn't have that. It was all through the organ, which is great. Just it's kind of hard when you're a kid to get engaged that way. We did have an amazing pastor. He was great at giving sermons. He was actually my confirmation teacher. My confirmation class was myself and one other kid. And so we had to meet on Saturday mornings at 8 o'clock. So when we would have sleepovers with our friends, we'd go to confirmation, and it wasn't the exciting stuff that we get to do in confirmation. It was a worksheet that we had to go and answer questions, and then we had to take notes. And I cannot tell you how many times I fell asleep during confirmation, which is horrible to do. Don't do that. Any of my 8th grade boys, if you guys do that, I won't yell at you. I'll just tell you don't do that. But it was hard. It was hard to get anything out of it. It was we never really got deep into the Bible. We talked a little, very surface level. It was more like facts and figures, that type of mentality than it was, hey, this is what the Bible says. And so, kind of like Danette, when I graduated high school, I really fell away from church. I did start college right away, but decided to have a little bit too much fun and end up, finally just going and working. And I worked for 23 years in the sales and marketing field. Eventually, I did finish my bachelor's degree, and last October, we finally made the decision for me to become a stay-at-home dad. So I'm a stay-at-home dad right now. I'm also getting my degree to be a teacher, a social studies middle school teacher. So I'm excited for that. But it was, when I fell away, it was one of those things where I believed in God. I prayed to God. I just did not, I wasn't involved in a church. I wasn't involved in that community. My community was really people that didn't have the same, the thing that we have in here, that same faith, and the direction we were going was just not a good direction. And so I struggled really all the way up until about 27 years old when I met my wife. And she was able to say, hey, okay, we're going to change this around. And I mean, I don't know why God gave her to me, but he did, and she's amazing. And so we got married, and then about 2 months before we get married, she came to me and said, hey, by the way, I want 4 kids and I want to adopt them. And I was like, wait, what? And she's like, yeah. And she said, and I want them to be African American. And I was kind of like, wait a minute, that actually makes sense. And yeah, that's something we want to do. And so I always tell people I know what God's voice sounds like because it's my wife's voice. Because I know God was speaking to me when she said that. Because I didn't even have to think twice about it. Needless to say, we did adopt two African American children, our oldest and then our 8-year-old. And then we thought we were done. We thought, yeah, this is it. And then we moved to a different house, had an extra bedroom, and we decided, you know what, we're gonna adopt one more kid, and we wanted to adopt a kid out of the foster care system, and somehow, some way, God worked His magic, and we ended up adopting a sibling group of 4 girls, and so we have 5 girls and 1 boy. I know the sympathy. You guys can feel it for me. It's awesome though. I love being a dad to girls. They're amazing, you know. So, but yeah, it's tough and it's a lot, you know. But every day, I mean, we're so glad to be here. We're so glad that I mean, we're totally dived back into to church. At our old church, we went. And we went to church and we left. We went to church and we left. I mean, we didn't even stay for the donuts afterwards. It was kind of one of those things. And eventually we got into a committee, and eventually we got into a small group, and it just took off for me and my wife too. Where now when these guys know, like, hey, we're kind of in a pinch. We need some help. Will you come in and jump in? I can't say no, you know. I mean, I just want to do it. So, so I encourage you guys to stay involved. If you're not involved, get involved in some way. I mean, be a substitute youth group leader, which it's awesome. A confirmation leader. Do something. Just take that one little step is all you need to do. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah. I appreciated that little plug that you did there at the end too. You did work in sales. We'll jump into another discussion question. Talk about your identity a little bit. What values do your family hold, and how does faith fit into those values?
I told my sister, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go to church and talk to some confirmation here. She goes, what are you gonna say? I have no idea. Like, how can you even be engaging at all? I don't know what I'm gonna say. But you're not, my sister doesn't listen. Yeah, I know, that's true. That is true. I'm one-dimensional. Are you guys doing, are you doing the next one? The Advent?
We're going to jump into the next question here. Where do you witness God in your everyday lives?
All right, everybody. We'll keep those conversations going outside of here as well. But I'm excited to share a bit of my faith formation story also. Now, I look out and I see a lot of familiar faces, but I know that there's some new folks here as well that have joined us throughout the pandemic. And that's thrown quite a wrench into, in my opinion, what it looks like to be the church. Now, God continues to move, and we continue to be able to make an impact, but when we're doing it solely by ourselves, I think we are sorely missing out on chances to be filled up and to do community together and be challenged and grow and all those important things. And that brings me back to my confirmation experience. Now, I've shared a bit with you at times. I was a checklist Lutheran. All right, so my parents were not very faithful people. So as I hear stories of folks that really accompanied us and made sure that things happen, my parents dropped me off on Daylight Savings Time Day to go have breakfast. And it was at the end of the service. So I sat outside before cell phones for over an hour. The pastor waved goodbye to me. Yeah, that's what I remember from Sunday school. And then my parents brought me into confirmation. And again, it was kind of the checklist Lutheran model where you had them baptized, you had them at Sunday school, you had them in confirmation, check, 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 and then things were done. Maybe some of you gathered here had experiences like that. For me, my saving grace was a small group leader named Jeff who made space for me. Jeff didn't have all of the answers, but Jeff was patient. Jeff let us be a little bit squirrely, but he continued to show us that he loved us by making space for us to bring our quirks and our questions and our hopes and our dreams and our angst that we didn't even know we had as teenagers into that living room of his. We did our confirmation stuff in people's homes. And for 4 years, Jeff accompanied our group. And at the time, I'm not certain that I really realized that there was important faith formation taking place in my life. Again, my parents really didn't go to church. We didn't talk about any of the stuff at home. They were fairly consistent in dropping me off, and I went because I had friends that were in my small group. But those friends from different backgrounds and different schools continued to be my lifeline to faith at various spots, really up until my mid-20s, when we kind of just started to move away and fall apart from each other, if you will. Before that, I would go back to my home church every single Christmas Eve for the late service, and we would sing all the classic Christmas carols, and we would joke around like we hadn't missed a beat. I never thought any of that was deeply faithful. I thought that it meant that I had some fun friends. But I've realized throughout my faith journey that those people were really put in place with me to accompany me through some hard times, through some times where I had questions, where I screwed up, where I didn't feel like I was good enough to experience God's love. And I kind of ventured away from the Lutheran Church for a bit when I really did start to take steps of faith. And I found myself in an evangelical community. And like you say, that I'm not going to say anything about the Catholics or the Missouri Synod. I won't rip on the evangelicals. There was a lot of really informative years for me within some of those friendships. But I also realized that as much as I always felt like I was far away from God, God was always continuing to come and pursue me. And some of my friends weren't quite filling me up with that grace and truth. Instead, they were saying, you need to change or else. And what I want you all to hear today, both for students and for parents, is that no matter where you're at in your journey, God is continuing to come to you. And I pray that you never feel far away from God. I feel like you would never, I hope that you would never have a day where you feel as though God's grace isn't for you. I pray that you always feel like you have a home here at Good Shepherd or whatever church community you find yourself in the future. But the big thing about my faith story, though, was just that I needed to be able to kind of claim that identity as God's beloved. If you were here at worship earlier, we sang a song talking about what Christ has done for us. Not just me, not just you, but for all of us, freeing us from sin and accompanying us as God's beloved children of God. And I want to encourage you, both students and parents, to continue having these important conversations with each other. Because, as I said to our confirmands this weekend at their affirmation of baptism service, it's been fairly easy to this point because you've known that you have something on the calendar. You know that you signed your kid up for confirmation, and so you're going to try to get them here as many Wednesdays as possible around your other schedule stuff. But once you take that step in affirming your baptism, what's next? How are you going to continue to take those bold steps of faith, not only as the students that are confirming their faith, which is what you all are doing in these years of study, but as parents who are continuing to live into that promise of baptism, not just up until 10th grade, but continuing to pray for your kid, to invite them to come to church and have these important in-depth conversations that show that you care and show that you're present with them.
Yeah. For time's sake, we are going to jump to the last discussion question. And you can talk with your student a little bit more about what that is. What might your faith look like after you get confirmed, students? How will you continue to grow in faith and community with one another? What obstacles might you run into on the way? And how are you gonna tackle those obstacles?
And parents, how might you grow in your faith this year too? Ooh.
So at this fun game on Friday, so I'm walking out. There wasn't a lot of people there, but it was a little bit loud and smudgy and stuff. Everything was not time on. And so I'm walking on the beach, and I get over to the sea, and the beach is like, yeah, it's like, these guys are yelling at me. And it was all the way we come. Oh, hey. So I went over there, and I was like, it's when they text Lola through Snapchat, they found Lola, and they're like, hey, you're yelling at your dad, you can't hear you. And Lola's like, well, it's because he's old. I'm like, well, and I had a stocking cap over my ears too. And I do have hearing aids, you know, but I'm like, and so then they wanted me to engage because, almost every single weekend, I have to give them an update because Gage beats me mad all the time. And they've been trying to help me like figure out how to beat him. I just can't beat him. And so they're like, you have to beat this kid. And so I have to do some of that. But I thought it was fun. I was like, I mean, it's cool that they actually were yelling at me. So.
We had a preschool at my first church, and I was like at Target or something like that, and one of the kids saw me, and it was like one of the most confusing things for them ever. Because I think they just assumed that like I lived and never leave. Because I'm out, I was always there. What are you doing now? Like, you could just see like the look on their faces, like,
I love it. I was like, this is so sweet. Did you see him singing to me? I mean, I don't think his favorite. He was belting. I was like, he was the same coach.
So how is it?
Oh, it was 21-0.
I'm a riot at parties. What? Professional prayers, I'm a riot at parties.
All right, we are going to wrap up. Thank you guys for taking time to talk about faith. I know that this can be sometimes a hard conversation to start, especially as we're going through the very busy lives that we live. I hope that you continue these conversations throughout the week, throughout when you're going to bed or eating a meal together or waking up in the morning or in the car ride. One of the simplest things that a family that I had at my last church said that they did was that every single car ride that they had from their sporting activity to home, they just did highs and lows and asked where they saw God throughout that day. And sometimes the answer was really obvious, and sometimes they had to dig a little bit. But it was just a really cool, simple way to bring faith into their lives on a daily basis. So I pray that you continue these conversations. Thank you for listening to our speakers tonight. Speakers, thank you for being here and sharing your stories and being vulnerable with us. Again, if you are interested in helping out with a small group, being on the sub list, or helping with youth group night, please come and talk to me. I would love to have you on the team. Otherwise, let's end in prayer. Please pray with me. Awesome God, I thank you for this group. I thank you for our speakers tonight. I know that we all have different journeys in our lives. We all experience our faith in different ways and see the ways that you work in our lives in so many different ways. We thank you for the community that we are a part of. We thank you for the ways that you bring us together and help us to grow in our faith together and learn more about you. We ask that you go with us after we leave tonight. Help us to continue having these sometimes difficult conversations, and help us look for the ways that you move in our lives. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.